In some of our churches, we might ask this question: what is the real problem? Is it the pastor, or is it the people? Today we'll be talking about the gift of pastoring.
Well, let's see. We've been going over some of the spiritual gifts that are listed in Scripture. Could you name some of them that apparently are in the church today? Teacher. Oh, yes, we looked at that one. Teacher. Give me another one. Without looking at your notes, this ought to just come right from your brain memory. Giving, did you say? Is that what you said? Giving. Okay, I've got a few more to go. Administration. And government. And helps. And mercy. And ministry. Ministry. Diaper changing is maybe ministry. And did we get most of them there? Seems like I've left out. Well, I haven't gotten evangelism yet. I think I've left out two of them. What would they be? Maybe I just didn't count right. Pastoring, I'm going to deal with that one today. Yeah, maybe we covered them all. Today, though, I want to talk about pastoring. If you have your Bibles, turn to Ephesians, the 4th chapter. Ephesians, the 4th chapter. As we come down to the 11th verse, we read this. He gave some to be apostles, prophets, evangelists, some to be pastors and teachers. How many spiritual gifts are listed in verse 11? How many? 8 in verse 11? Wrong. 5? No, actually 4. Let me give you those. Verse 11, there's apostles, there's prophets, there's evangelists, and then there are pastors who are teachers. Actually, only lists 4 gifted men in verse 11. Now, count the word some. How many times does the word some occur in verse 11? Yeah, 4 times. All right? See, the last time it doesn't occur before the word teacher. So what he's trying to say is look, there is a spiritual gift known as pastoring, and a teacher, you see, is just one aspect of that spiritual gift. Now, here's a question for you. What is the primary responsibility, you see, of a pastor? What's the primary responsibility? And if you'll look now at the next verse, we're going to have a primary purpose. Notice the word for. That's going to help us a little bit there. It's going to be for the preparation now of God's people. Very important that pastors understand that they have a primary purpose, and this is to equip and prepare people. All right? Let's look at the word prepare because it's an interesting word. It was used in the medical field, outside of Scripture, in the medical field. So if you would do a word study on this word, this is what you're liable to see. And it was a person who would fix somebody's bone. You had a dislocated bone, you'd go and he could fix you up. That's the way the word is used. It was also used of a person who was a naval supplier. A naval supplier. In other words, what he did would be to outfit a ship. So what we're seeing is that the pastor, you see, is kind of like a doctor. All right? He's an outfitter. It is also a term that was used, you see, in the military of one who would equip an army. So he's an equipper. That's what it means. It is a word that means, for the most part, that this person is a craftsman. A craftsman. That's what a pastor is. He's a craftsman. He is a perfecter. He's an equipper. He's an outfitter. And what he is supposed to do, you see, is outfit, you see, the people of God. What does this mean? I think it means this. And it is that when the saints gather together, and the pastor, you see, is helping his flock, he has a primary responsibility to help those people be outfitted for life. Which means then, I think this, that church is supposed to be somewhat of a school. A school. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're saying, now I understand why I don't like church. I never liked school. But that's what the church is supposed to be. It's supposed to be, you see, a training center. A training center. A place, you see, where laymen, you see, are to be trained, you see, for the purposes of God. So here's a primary responsibility. If your pastor is primarily an entertainer, you see, he's not doing what he is supposed to do. If all he ever does is just preach the gospel and get people saved, he's not fulfilling a primary purpose. You see, a primary purpose, you see, of your pastor, you see, is to equip and outfit, you see, the people of God. By the way, this is the same truth, I believe, that's taught in 1 Corinthians, the 14th chapter. So if you would look at that, 1 Corinthians, the 14th chapter. Actually, before we get to the 14th chapter, let's jump a little to the 12th chapter. Look at the last verse, if you would, of the 12th chapter. He says, eagerly desire the greater gifts. The greater gifts. First of all, what are the greater gifts? Can you tell me? What are the greater gifts? He says we are to covet the greater gifts. Oh, well, if you continue to read, he tells us this. Look at verse 28. Verse 28. And in the church, God has appointed, number one, primarily, the apostles. Number two, secondarily, what? Prophets. Then number three, what? Teachers. By the way, does this sound somewhat like Ephesians chapter 4? It's not exactly the same, but it's pretty close, because he's dealing now with what I would call foundational spiritual gifts. Here in 1 Corinthians 12th chapter, he's saying, now look, these are the foundational spiritual gifts. These are the ones that are primary in the church. And then in verse 31, he says, look, this is what you are to covet. Now, what does he mean? Now, I want you to covet. A lot of people misunderstand this verse. They think that if you covet the gift of apostleship, that you can acquire this gift. What do you think? Is that how you get gifts? By coveting certain spiritual gifts? See, I don't think so. All right? He is talking to the assembly as a whole. And what he is saying is look, when you are gathered together, when you're assembled together, what I want you to do is make this, you see, your intense desire to go after, you see, the gifts that are of primary importance, such as apostleship, prophets, teachers. By the way, in the Corinthian church, what gift were they going after? Huh? Yeah, they were going after tongues together. Oh, tongues was so exciting. I mean, you know, what a nice little emotional type of a gift. It was so sensational and so exciting. By the way, where did Paul put the gift of tongues when he was talking about the order of covet the greater gifts? Let's see, apostles, prophets, teachers. By the way, where did he list tongues in the list? Oh, isn't that something? Dead last. However, what were they doing? They're reversing this whole thing. Now, when you come to the 14th chapter, what he's going to do is he's going to explain what he has just said. So let's look at the 14th chapter. In the 14th chapter, he says, follow the way of love. That's what he just told you in the 13th chapter. That's the great love chapter. Follow the way of love. Now he goes on to say, and eagerly desire spiritual gifts. Same word he used in 12 verse 31. Covet earnestly the greater gifts. This is what he has said. Covet earnestly the spiritual gifts, he says. Especially what gift? Oh, the gift of what? Gift of prophecy. He could have said apostleship, but there were no apostles in the church at this particular time when he was writing. So, since they couldn't actually go after that one, he went to the one that was second on the list, and that is the gift of prophecy. He says, look, I want you to covet the prophecy. Question now, why? Why covet the gift of prophecy? Anybody know? What did a prophet do for the people? Anybody know? Yeah, he strengthened. He encouraged them. Where do you read that? Oh, yeah, if we continue to read. Everyone who prophesies speaks to men for their strengthening, and he encourages them. So he goes through this whole section and says, look, he says, really, what I want you to do is I want you to get those gifts, you see, where people are built up. That's what he is trying to say. Problem with the gift of tongues is anybody build up when they stand up and speak in a foreign language and nobody understands what they're saying. Huh? And the answer is no. You don't understand. You don't understand. I remember one time I was at a church. I preached a message. It was at a Chinese church in Portland. And when I got all done, I sat down, and then somebody got up, and they translated basically what I had just said. And I sat there, yawned, counted all the holes in the sea. And, I was so bored. I was thinking, man, I wish they'd hurry up, so we could go home and eat. I wasn't being edified. I didn't even know what he was saying. The only thing that bothered me is he condensed my 35-minute sermon into 15, and so I wondered what he really left out. But nevertheless, I didn't know what he was talking about. Well, that's the same problem they had with tongues. Well, finally, when he comes to verse 26 of this 14th chapter, he comes to a conclusion of what he's been developing in the first part of this chapter. He says, okay, what then shall we say, brothers, when you come together? Oh, this is our gathering, you see, as people of God. When you come together, somebody has a hymn, somebody has a word of instruction, revelation, tongue, and interpretation. He said, regardless of the gifts that you have, all must be done for what? All must be done for the building up of the body of Christ. In other words, all must be done, you see, for edification and strengthening. There's the conclusion. That's why, when you come to church, you need to covet those gifts that will build you up. So, I would say this, a pastor, along with some of these other gifts too, but a pastor has a primary responsibility to see that the people are all built up, edified. Now let me ask you this question. Does that happen in a lot of our churches, week after week after week? Or do you find that you can go to church and really not be built up a whole lot? I mean, think of all the time we have wasted in church over the years. I've gone to church and we have sung this song, Climb, climb up Sunshine Mountain, heavenly faces glow. Anybody ever sing that song? Oh yeah, well, some of you. Oh, you've never sung that? You mean you have never really gone to church? But frankly, friends, what in the world does that song mean? Huh? You say, I don't know, but we sure love it. Do we sing it every week? I've been trying to figure out for my whole life what in the world it means. Finally, I've come to this conclusion. I don't think it means anything. In other words, what strengthening and edification is to be found in that song? And I can't find it. Let me ask you this question. If all you hear is, you have to be saved every single Sunday, do you grow? Do you get edified? And I'd say, no. I'm sorry, you don't. Oh, to be sure, we need evangelism in the church. But if that's all you hear, what I'm trying to say is the pastor, you see, is falling down on his responsibility. Because he is to equip, you see, the saints. He is to strengthen us. You see, one thing about the gospel is, the gospel, when you hear it week after week, you always rejoice in the gospel, but really there's nothing new in the gospel, is there? Nothing new. Now, in order to be built up, you have to have something new. I mean, think about it. If you're going to build a house, you're going to build it out of bricks. What you're going to do is you're going to put down a brick. What are you going to do over here? You're going to put down another brick. And then what are you going to do over here? You're going to put down another brick. You got to have a new brick. But sometimes all we do is we take one brick, and what do? We just kind of move it around the foundation all the time, you know. But you don't get built up in that. You can rejoice in the brick, but you can't, you see, really construct anything. And I think there are a lot of baby Christians out there, a lot of anemic Christians, and one of the reasons for it is well, they're never hearing anything new. It's the same old thing, week after week. There's really no edification taking place. What we need are some pastors, you see, who are bringing us something new, really building us up. Who knows? We might have people going out of church saying something like this. Well, how about that? Up until today, I always thought an epistle was the wife of an apostle. You know? I mean, we might see some dynamic things happen in church. Might even get reactions like this, where they say, "You've inspired me, Reverend. I'm going to keep one commandment a week until I get through all 10. So, it might help. Well, this is what I'm trying to say. The key to this kind of stuff is apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. Here's the purpose for the equipping of the saints. And then, notice, in the Greek text, he actually changes the word here. It is for the equipping of the saints unto the work of the ministry. By the way, according to this verse, who are the ministers in the church? According to this verse, is it the pastor or is it the people? And according to this verse, it's the people. The people do the ministry. All right? The people do the work. You see, one of the problems we have in our churches today is we hire this guy. And he is our minister. And he does all the work. Goes contrary to this verse. What is he supposed to do? He is to equip the people. And as a result of them being equipped, what happens? Hey, they go out and they work. They go out and work. You got a church of 900 people. How many ministers should you have in a church of 900 people? You say, let's see, on church growth studies, we've been studying this. Let's see, one minister for every 150 people. That would be, I want to tell you something. If you've got a church of 900 people, you need about 900 ministers. You say, wow, how could we afford 900 ministers? I say, based upon this verse, how can you afford not to have 900 ministers? The average church reminds me of what I see happening at that football game on Sunday. And you've heard this. In fact, maybe we just heard it last week in chapel. 22 men down on the field, desperately in need of rest, and 100,000 people up in the stands, desperately in need of exercise. Isn't that really the problem of the church today? The problem with the church is we need the exercise. We're not getting it. We come, we sit, we watch the guy perform, and then he does the work all week long. No wonder he gets burned out. I mean, who wouldn't get burned out? Onto the work of the ministry. In other words, the people you see are the ones who do the ministry. And then notice, this is going to result in the building up of the body of Jesus Christ. In other words, what's going to happen is look, as we begin to minister one to another, everybody gets built up. So, this is what happens. You find out you have a spiritual gift. It's the gift of encouragement. And you encourage this dear sister right here. All right? And she all of a sudden gets encouraged. I do have a spiritual gift. So she has the gift of giving. And she hears about your school bill. And so what she does is she pays off your school bill. All right? And then as a result, what do? You minister to her. And then you minister to the pastor. Did you know that? You minister to the pastor. You minister to the pastor. You minister to the pastor. You know what I'm trying to say? And the pastor actually gets stronger in this. It's kind of like this. If you were to draw a circle right here. Here's the pastor. He's got these 4 people out here. You see, he's trying to equip these 4 people. When these people start to serve, they minister to this person, and back to this person. You see. And what happens is the whole body gets strong. There is no status quo. I mean, the church becomes strong. Then all of a sudden, the world looks at us and says, why? Oh, what a model. We'd like to be part of that. And the next thing you know, you've got people who are coming to church, getting saved, and whatever. Are we seeing a lot of people getting saved in our country today? No, in fact, what we're actually seeing is if churches are growing, they're just moving out of one, going into another one. We have the biggest church shuffle going on, in our country. But Christianity hasn't grown in 10 years in this country. Okay, we haven't grown. fact, maybe it's even been longer than that. We are at status quo. That's not the plan. The plan is people are to be equipped so that they can begin to minister, and then when they begin to minister, guess what happens? What happens is the whole body gets stronger. And then frankly, I think as the body gets stronger, that's how then we win people to Jesus Christ. Because think about this. Evangelism ought to be a byproduct of a healthy body. Does that make sense to you? I mean, the children that come as a result of reproduction, you see, come as a result, you see, of a healthy body. However, what happens in a lot of churches is we get the cart before the horse. We say, Pastor, we're not seeing people saved. What you have to do is you have to start preaching the gospel every week. And so he preaches, you see, to this host of people who, for the most part, you see, are all saved, and he tells them to get saved. Well, that doesn't make sense, does it? Instead of saying, look, I want to tell you something, I want to equip you people so that you can go and talk over your backyard fence, you see, to your Jehovah's Witness friend, without popping them in the nose and getting mad at them, you know, and leading them to Jesus Christ. I mean, can you do that? Can you do that? And I say, that's the plan. That's the plan. You say, yes, that's a great plan. Great plan. As I think about my church, I wish it would work. I wish it would work. However, for it to work, you have to understand this. There is no substitute for long hours spent in study. Do you understand that? No substitute. Long hours spent in the study. I mean, if you're going to equip your people, then you're going to have to study. Think about that. You're going to have to study. You're going to have to come up with something new. The average pastor, does he ever come up with anything new? No. He doesn't come up with anything new. The reason for it is he's been too busy. He's been too busy. He's doing everything else. He's raking the leaves of the church. He's fixing the building. He's running around helping all the widows with their cars. I mean, he just doesn't have time, you see, to study. And finally, guess what happens? Saturday night comes. You know? And he gets our daily bread out and says, man, I hope I get an inspiration here. All right? Then he gets his illustration book out. And the next thing you know, he's giving the people something. You say, lay it on, boy. I wish my pastor were here to hear this. But really, the problem is not so much the pastor, I don't think. You know what the problem is? It's the people. It's the people. What are you expecting from your pastor? Earl Rademacher is the president of the Western Conservative Baptist Seminary. Wrote an article sometime back in Moody Monthly entitled this, The Jack of All Trades Syndrome. He says we're committing spiritual suicide in our churches today. We're insisting that our pastors go at a killing pace. But he says we're the ones who are dying. We demand that our pastor be a charming pulpiteer with pastor's heart, great willingness to listen to us and our problems. We want him to go house to house visiting the sick, shepherding the flock, encouraging visitors, join the church. He must be a leader who can organize minister, church business, soul winner. Able to work closely with all young people. Must be the taxi driver when we have errands. No other way to get there. He must be the church custodian, maintenance man, carpenter, and even the plumber. He says this, unless we evangelical church members in America wake up to what we're doing to ourselves today by trying to make a professional clergyman do what God intended us to do. He said this, we'll die, and we'll die on the vine. And I think, frankly, that's where our churches are. Somehow we think if we can put in enough money in the offering and they can pay this guy, then he can do all the ministry. All the while, you see, he doesn't have any time to equip the people. And when he's not equipping the people, you're not growing. And when you're not growing, you're dying. And the church is dying. And we're not reaching the world for Jesus Christ. So practically, what does this mean? What does it mean? It means this. We need people in our church who go to the pastor and say, look, pastor, is there anything that you're doing? Anything that you're doing that we could do? All right? You say, well, we don't like our pastor and we're trying to get rid of him. Well, go and tell him that you'd like to do something for him. He'll probably die of a heart attack. And, it'll get rid of your problem. All right? Yeah. What are you doing that we could do? That'd be one thing. The second thing is that we need deacons who know how to work. Deacons who know how to work. Turn with me to Acts chapter 6. I'll show you a principle right here. Acts chapter 6. Big problem arose in the early church. What happened is the widows were being neglected. They weren't getting fed. So they came to the apostles, verse 2, and they told the apostles about this situation. And the apostles said, "Let the widows die." Is that what they said? No. They said, "We will stop what we're doing and we will take care of the widows." Is that what they said? Didn't say that either. Look, verse 2. "It is not reason," he says, "for us to neglect the ministry of the Word of God in order to wait on tables. So, brothers, what I want you to do is get some deacons. Choose 7 men who can serve, you see, these tables." I think this is the beginning, you see, the office of deacon. There were certain qualifications that they had to meet. And then notice what we have here. As a result, they said, read them. Look at the last part of verse 3. "We will turn this responsibility over to them, and we will give our attention, you see, to prayer." Prayer. Prayer. What is prayer? People pray today. Prayer and the ministry of the Word. And guess what happened? When they followed the pattern, I like this. Verse 7, "So the Word of God spread." And the increase. It was tremendous. It was tremendous. Does this make sense to you or not? And it looks to me like it's really the problem with people, because the people, you see, are expecting their pastor to do all the work. He does all the work, they do nothing. Very little right now. And the result is they're not out there. But just that, are you more effective if you have 1 minister in a community or 200 ministers in a community? It's obvious if you've got 200 ministers. But most of our people, you see, are not equipped to go out there and minister to the needs of people who are in elderly old folks' homes and retirement centers and single parents and kids that are running wild all over us. I mean, you talk about the need. We have tremendous needs out there. We're not equipped to do it. It's one of the purposes of the college is to equip us. Hopefully, when you leave from here, you do more than just get a nice career and get a job and make some money, you see, and foster the same thing. No, we need to be people who go out, you see, and minister ourselves and serve and help the aching hearts see better in our world today. Any question on that? Any question? I think that's pastor. Oh, I'm not saying pastor shouldn't preach the gospel. I am just saying, look, he needs to be involved in equipping the saints. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm also not saying that you shouldn't evangelize in your church when everybody's gathered together. Oh, I think that's necessary too. But I am saying this, look, when saints are gathered, they need to be equipped. And I don't know. Maybe you do that on just Sunday nights, Saturday nights, Wednesday nights, Tuesday nights, maybe not Sunday morning. On the other hand, it may be Sunday morning. I mean, you have to figure out, can you get unsaved there at certain times? So you have to figure this whole thing out. It will vary, I think, from culture to culture, people to people, and whatever. But whatever the case, God's people need to be built. Well, let's talk lastly then about the gift of evangelism. The gift of evangelism. Because notice, the primary purpose of an evangelist is to do what? According to Ephesians chapter 4. To spread the gospel? Answer is no. He is to what? Equip the saints. In other words, he has the same role as the pastor. You say an evangelist? Yes. An evangelist is to equip the saints. Wow, that's an interesting concept. Have you, in your lifetime, ever had an evangelist come to your church and do this? To equip the saints. I want to tell you, I've never had that happen for the most part of my life. I've never had that happen. I've had evangelists come to the church and I sit there and they stood up and said, now look, hey, I want to tell you something. I had 15 people saved in my meetings last week. 15 people! How many people did you bring to the Lord last week? Last month? Huh? How many people? And I sat there and said, oh, I feel so guilty. I'm worthless. I can't do anything. And all they did is make it worse for me. Have you ever had that happen to you? Maybe they just pour the guilt on you. And I'm sitting there saying, well, somebody show me how to do it. You know, if I were only a great preacher and I could stand behind the pulpit, maybe I could have people saved too. I'm just not, you see, very spiritual. So, I don't see that at all. I see an evangelist coming into the church and saying, okay, now, I'll tell you what, this week I'm going to equip you. I'm going to equip you to lead people to Jesus Christ. Isn't that great? I'm not going to heap guilt on you. I'm not going to tell you how great I am. What I am going to do is I'm going to equip you. Okay? I'm going to equip you. So that you people can go out there and do the work of the ministry. Now, I'm going to be a little like the pastor. The pastor, in order to equip the people, has to spend long hours in the study. Now, he's got to be in the Word. As an evangelist, I've got to spend long hours in the world. I'll be in the world. He's going to be in the Word. And then, we're both going to come back, and we're going to equip you. So this is my plan. My plan is, on Monday night, we're going to have this service. I'm going to equip you, you see, in how to lead people to Jesus Christ. Now, on Tuesday, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to go down to Willamette University, and I'm going to take you two people with me. Okay? We're going to go down there, and we're going to see if we can talk to some people about Jesus Christ. Then on Tuesday night, we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about how Jesus went up to strangers, and he made this happen. Has that ever happened in anybody's life? Where they took you out in the daytime and helped you do it. All right? And then came back at night and said, now let's talk about how we do this. And I want to equip you. I'll tell you, I have hardly seen that. Wouldn't it be something? If somebody would just say, look, I want to show you how to do it. Why don't you go there? Okay? The closest thing I have ever seen to that happening was when Thomas Younger was the president of this college, and he was in chapel. Do you recall that? At the beginning of the year. And one day he said to me, he said, Miller, he said, let's go and talk to somebody about the Lord. And I said, oh, I don't know if I want to do that or not. And he said, well, let's go. So we went, and he stumbled his way through the whole conversation. And when he got all done, I says, I can do that. And you know, that was about 50% of it right there. Just recognizing that, look, hey, just going out there, talking to people, stumbling around, trying to share the person of Jesus Christ, being yourself, not being this high-powered evangelist anyhow, but letting people see you with all your warts and who you are. I mean, that's what Jesus did, wasn't it? In John chapter 4, I mean, he goes up to this woman at the well and he starts talking to her and he says, I want to talk to you. You know, man, I'm tired. You know, could you get me a glass of water? You remember that? I mean, Jesus was no super power evangelist in his three-piece suit, you know, coming up to this woman. I mean, he was just, hey, a tired person needing a drink of water. And from there, you see, he worked the conversation to the place where he gave her something to drink of, you see, that was forever. Wow. I want to tell you what the problem is, though. One of our problems is that people who are being saved in our churches today are being saved by people, led to the Lord by people who have known the Lord for maybe 3 years and less. 3 years and less. Frankly, if you've been saved over 3 years, you're not talking to anybody about Jesus Christ. That's what the statistics have told us. All kinds of studies have been done. Forget it. Ever saving anybody if you've been saved over 3 years. Why? Did I know? Huh? Absolutely. You don't have any unsafe friends. All your friends are what? Safety. Safety. I mean, who likes to hang around with unsafe people? Anybody? Who likes to have unsafe people over their house? They come in and they swear. And they blow smoke in your house. Frankly, I want the nicest people I know to come to my house. All right? And who are they? They're you people. You know? You're nice. You're gentle. I mean, you know, you don't smoke in my house. You don't swear. You say thank you. I mean, you're the kind of people who want me around. And after a while, guess what happens? I don't know anybody out there. And because I don't know anybody out there, I'm not talking to anybody. I need an evangelist to come in and say, okay, let's see what we can do about this problem. I need an evangelist to come in and say, look, I got a plan. Here's my plan. What you need to do is build a relationship. Build a relationship with some unsaved people. And as a result, maybe the everyday conversation, you know, okay? Something will just come up. Portland Trailblazers was playing a game the other night. They were playing the Chicago Bulls. Did you know that? Anybody see that? Quite a game went in a couple of times there. It was on television if you had cable. For some reason, I don't have that too. All right? So I couldn't get it. I could get the voice, but not, you know, I couldn't get the game. But I called up dear Mrs. Barth and said, Mrs. Barth, you getting that basketball game? She said, yep. I said, how about if Scott and I come over and watch the basketball game tonight? Yeah, come on over. You know. Who's Mrs. Barth? I'll tell you about Mrs. Barth. Mrs. Barth is a gal, elderly gal, old school teacher, whose husband died one day. And she needed somebody to perform the funeral. So she went to her daughter, and her daughter says, well, man, we don't know anybody who could perform this ceremony. Oh, yes. Yes, we do. Tony's baseball coach. See, one of the things I decided to do in my own personal life, because think about it. You know, I pastored a church, I taught at a college, I go speak at churches. I don't have time for unsafe people. All right? I had to force myself to somehow get involved with unsafe people. And so I got involved in Little League, and I was involved in it for over 10 years, and I coached for 7 years. And when she said to me, she said, hey, would you conduct a funeral? I said, I'd be glad to. And, hey, I had a great time. One thing led to another. I'll never forget the day in which I was sitting there just talking to her. And she said, tell me. She said, why are there so many churches in town? And I tried to say, well, you know, the Swedes came over and the Germans came over, you know, and they all have their different cultures. And then I said, also, the devil put a few churches here, too, like the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses. Oh, she said. What about the Christian Scientists? I said, oh, yeah, the devil put that one in his town, too. So it's another cult. And she looked at me and she said, well, you know, I'm a Christian Scientist. One thing led to the other. I gave her a Bible, I kept going over there, I kept visiting. First, Christian Scientist says this, that death is all in your head. Did you know that? It's an illusion, it's not real. One day, she opened up her eyes and said, you know what, my husband's not here, and I think that's real. And so, yeah. Next thing you know, she's coming to church. In fact, I called her last week, I said, look, I know it's late, but I'm hungry for Mexican food. You want to go out to a Mexican dinner tonight, you know? All I'm trying to say is you have to force yourself a little, and you get out there, and the next thing you know, hey, the opportunities just start coming. Just start coming. And then you can be in a position where you can share Jesus Christ and whatever. I think that's what evangelists need to do in their churches, and not get up there and just preach and put more guilt on us. In fact, we need them to come to this chapel. I've been looking for it. Who can come to this chapel and say, kids, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be here for a whole week. And we're going to spend the afternoons down on the campus of Willamette University just talking to people. Who are your friends? Let's take them to lunch today. Let's see if we can bring the conversation around, talk about the Lord. And then let's come back in the evening and talk about how we did it. Isn't that great? It's one of the reasons I wanted Tom Younger to come to chapel this year, because I wanted him to just share some of the ways that, you know, he's talked to people. I don't know if he shared with you this one, but I remember when telling the story like that, there was a man out there in the street holding up a sign looking for a job. And he walked up to him when he was out on his walk one day. And he said, well, how are people responding to your sign? And he said, well, hey, not bad. You know, I get a few hecklers, but for the most part, people like it. He says, would you mind if I had a word of prayer with you right here on the corner? Pray that you get a job. Oh, now, well, go ahead. You know, I mean, what's a guy going to say? So he prays for this guy right on the street. Says, well, hey, thanks for letting me pray with you. My name's Tom Younger. I'm a pastor over here at the Baptist Church. Guess who walked into the church the next night? Huh? I mean, you talk about then the building of a relationship. I mean, there's where it started. No high-powered stuff. Here's a guy who is on a walk. Somehow sensitive to the fact that we need to build relationships and say, could you give me a drink of water? You know, something that simple. Could I have a word of prayer with you? And then just see where it develops. Oh, the church is in trouble today. I think one of the reasons it's in trouble today is because we're not following the plan. The plan is pastors, evangelists, support type gifts. You see, equipping the people. As the people are equipped, they begin to minister to one another. As they minister to one another, we all get strong. And then as we get strong, guess what happens? A healthy byproduct is you see the world run to Jesus Christ. And I think this is practical stuff, like this spiritual gift stuff. So I think we need to be working. Tomorrow we'll get into kind of the controversial stuff, so I'll see you then.